It's great that you're here. Three Countries, Two Cases, as we said, is a classic, which is kind of a best-of the audio, radio ecosystem cases that we from the program group have seen over Europe in the last 12 months. So I'm really delighted to have this distinguished panel with me. You will, in the next 39 minutes, hear from a podcast with a star that doesn't appear in the podcast. You will hear from audio as a disruptive force here in Greece, and you will hear about a radio station from a town that doesn't actually exist. So if that can't help you here, I can't help you. Without further ado, please welcome from Finland, Pekka Ruohontana, who's speaking about the Sanna Marin podcast.
Thank you. My notes. Easter hair well? Good. Thank you for the invitation here, and thank you for the opportunity to present our concept. And sorry for my broken English. I am an old-timer coming from the north and also from a very ancient genre of radio theater. The nasty joke in Finland says that radio theater is the one where the dialogue is nicely pronounced very well and in a very old-fashioned way, as in the Dionysus Theater at Acropolis. But I am here to talk about perhaps more about the future and looking new ways of doing audio drama among podcasts. How to benefit means of drama in podcast. I have a case study, so there is quite a lot to read for you. As I said, I'm an old-timer. I come from YLE, which is the public broadcaster of Finland. We have got interesting experiences in biofiction, which is, and I think that our case is more political than celebrity story. We did a story of our Prime Minister. We informed her, but she didn't give us an interview or anything. We sent it to her to be heard, but she didn't react on that. But fiction based on real characters and their fates and stories is nothing new. I mean, in cinema, there is now running a film called A Complete Unknown that tells about Bob Dylan. And, for example, The Apprentice, that is about Donald Trump. But why not to use this super lightweight audio drama compared to film and TV series in doing biofiction and picking up political issues?
Mä oon aina tykännyt siivota. Siivotessa voi ajatella. Kesärannassa on paljon siivoamista. Mutta kun mikään määrä siivoamista ei enää riitä pitämään päätä koossa, niin mä alan juosta. Teen töitä, siivoon ja juoksen. Mutta sitten kun mikään määrä siivoamista ja juoksemista ei enää riitä, niin mä alan juhlia. Ja mä juhlin lujaa. Painan kaasua. Kiihdytän. Maisemat vilastaa ohi yhä nopeammin. Äkkiä tajun, että jos mä jatkan, niin mä ajan päin seinään. Jos mä jatkan pääministerinä, niin mä kuolen. Tässä puhuu Sanna Marin, joka on vielä elossa.
Sarja perustuu tositapahtumiin. Sanna Marinin lähipiiriin kuuluneita ihmisiä on haastateltu, muun muassa poliitikkoja, avustajia, tutkijoita, virkamiehiä ja toimittajia. He ovat kertoneet tietojaan, muistojaan, mielipiteitään, juoruja ja huhuja. Materiaalin pohjalta on luotu tämä draamasarja Suomen lähihistoriasta.
Hey, international audience, do you know who Sanna Marin is and about her story? Great. We didn't end up making this political biofiction from out of nothing. We have rehearsed for 10 years, making musical biofiction stories during the summers. Over 10 years we have done this. Finnish pop stars and bands. We have released it always as a catalog in the beginning of July in YLE player called Yle Areena and broadcasted them on radio in the afternoons of every working day in July in the biggest radio channel in Finland. In this series, the biggest challenge is always whom to choose as the person whose story we will tell. I mean, so that it's surprising enough, but so that the character is well known enough, so that the audience would be interested in it, and also that always the story needs to be interesting and there needs to be a good twist in the story. And there needs to be enough good music that we can broadcast and podcast. And the music in this series have been always original. And also interesting story of the person, interesting music, and interesting era or a time. And these all need to meet. To me, in this series, the magic moment is when we have fiction scenes and fiction story, and it comes together with the real original music. That is, and the fiction like leads the listener to have perhaps a new perspective on this music. And the music is like the documentary part in these stories. And while listening, you can perhaps Google whether the story really was that way. And this was our biggest success, a story of Armi, a beauty queen, Miss Finland in late 70s, who was seduced to be a pop star, to make a pop star career. And of course, she fell in love with a Carrie Glitter type of a guy, older guy, who never proposed, who never married her, although their relationship was a nationwide known common secret. And the numbers are quite nice. We got 300,000 starts per episode for this, and altogether we got as many starts as there are inhabitants in Finland. But how to take these summer stories into politics? And of course, we had to choose Sanna Marin, who's our former prime minister, well-known prime minister. Her photo was on the cover of the Time and in the Vogue. She was listed among the 100 most powerful women in the world. And how did our series go? It was a very big success in Finland. My colleague here, Hansku, said that it's in our player Yle Areena as the fourth, and I said, what the hell, it should be the first. And Hansku said, yeah, but the three first ones, they are videos, TV series, and our is a podcast series. That was really like the first time that something came up so hugely in so short time. And this was because of Sanna Marin. And that was really also a very special time in Finnish history, because all the five big parties were led by women. 5 main ministers were the same party leaders, ministers, and 4 out of those 5 were less than 35 of age. And this government took us through the pandemic, took us through the beginning of Ukrainian war, and took Finland into NATO. And when we started, our series were all over the media. We were in tabloid headline posters when we published that our aim is to start a series like that we aim to start script writing it, and we were in the tabloids. And I am most proud that the word audio drama was mentioned in the editorial of the biggest Finnish newspaper. Sanna Marin got extra famous because of her dancing videos, her private dancing videos that went public. The pressure on her was huge. Her every step was followed by the political enemies and by the media. Is she a good mother? How is her marriage? Was she drunk in the nightclub? With whom did she dance? Does she have a right to have a private life? And keep dancing, Sanna, said Hillary Clinton to her. Our series created in Finland a vivid discussion if this is correct or not. And this is, I would say, nothing stranger than The Crown in Netflix, telling about the English royals. But Sanna Marin's history is so close history, and our media is so intimate. When we wrote Sanna Marin's inner monologue, that was like getting super close to her thoughts. And of course, these thoughts were fiction, but the story itself was well researched. It was like Sanna Marin would be whispering in the ear of the listeners. And that is the power of audio drama. We are, in terms of radio, we are expensive, but in terms compared to TV series or cinema, we are cheap. So this is a good way of handling difficult political issues in podcasts. And while doing these summer stories, we also learned how to use the marketing power of Yle. Here is our TV trailer.
Suomeksi sanottuna, nyt ei ole oikea aika lähteä mökille. Tyttöhallitus, huulipunahallitus, sukkahousuhallitus. Get over it. Liian nuori, liian nainen, liian seksikäs. Minä olen Sanna Marin.
And we are not done yet because we will release in May a new series of the leader, very controversial leader of our right-wing populistic party. And here are some ideas for you from whom to make audio drama. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Pekka. We just discussed, we'll probably take all three cases, and if we have a bit of time left, we're very happy to take some questions. All right? So if you have questions, keep them in mind, be a bit patient, and we'll discuss them in just a few minutes. Next up is a local case, dare I say it, from two folks here in Greece who have a very disruptive project, dare I say, to target especially, but not only, young people in audio as a disruptive force. Please welcome Professor Betty Tsakarestou and Panagiotis Menegos.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here, and we are ready to ask you two questions. How about introducing Gen Z communication students into podcasting, not as listeners, but as audio producers, storytellers? And how about creating a great partnership between an academic lab and a journalistic organization to join forces to enable and empower them into becoming a force for change, to have their disruptive voices heard and make their impact to be noticed. I'm Betty Tsakarestou. I'm an associate professor and the director of Advertising and Public Relations Lab, and along with my colleague,
I'm Panagiotis Menegos. I work with IMED as podcast content and production manager. We're not alone in this project. We work with two excellent colleagues like Kelly Kiki and Stavros Kaperonis. A little more on our organizations. IMED is a non-profit journalism organization. It was founded in 2018 with the exclusive donation of Stavros Niarchos Foundation. IMED Podcasts started 4 years ago. We started from scratch and we produce one-off audio documentaries, mini narrative and investigative series, and some talk podcasts covering current affairs and the journalistic community. What about AdNPR Lab?
AdNPR Lab is part of the Department of Communication, Media and Culture. We are already 32 years old, and we have a model that we are collaborating, having established partnerships with communication, digital media partners into introducing the students into real-world challenging projects. And as part of this mission, the podcasting module has been introduced.
I'm not going to stretch any further on how interesting and relevant and adventurous is podcasting. After all, we are in an audio conference. So I'd like to point out that we try to make students become familiar with a production, a real production workflow, and to see their projects published in the real world. You can listen to them in whichever podcast platform you're using to listen your podcasts. And we can jump to Betty for the core values of the project.
You need to introduce and to make, when we say enable students in communication to become podcasters and disruptors as they aspire to be, one needs to design an innovative learning and action-based journey. So actually, we took 3 insights about Gen Z and put them into action. The first thing is that they need their voice, to have a voice, and their voice heard. The second is to have ownership of what they're doing. And the third is that they need, and they ask for having leadership, not just to be listeners, users, or audiences. They want to lead with their voices. So a participatory, co-created journey between us and with them has been introduced to them to introduce them into podcasting.
So at the beginning of each semester, we're doing a lot of reading. Actually, Betty is doing most of the reading.
I'm the reader.
And there is an assignment. There is an umbrella project, very relevant, super relevant with this generation, Gen Z generation. So we're calling students to think outside the box and produce podcasts on teams consisted of 4 to 6 persons. They're producing podcasts 10 to 12 minutes. You can see the umbrella subjects is how they interact with the media on the first year. Possibly arguably the most important issue of their generation, Gen Z and the climate crisis. And this year, in the program that was completed a few weeks ago, we saw how they understand and interpret the notion of resilience. So we had podcasts on social media, youth subcultures, even conspiracy theories, on fossil fuels, food waste, and fast fashion. And this year, we listened to podcasts featuring hate speech, FOMO, fear of missing out, remote work versus in-person work, and situationships. So before we delve into how we work, let me play a couple of extracts. It's in Greek, but it's going to be super fast.
Τώρα θα σκέφτεστε, τι σχέση έχει ένα εκπαιδευτικό podcast με το TikTok. Με λίγα λόγια, το TikTok είναι παντού. Από τη γάτα του γείτονα που έγινε viral, μέχρι τον ίδιο το γείτονα που άρχισε να χορεύει Satty Wednesday. Όλοι χορεύουμε πλέον στο ρυθμό του TikTok.
Ο καλεσμένος μας λοιπόν θα μας πει και στη συνέντευξή του διάφορες λύσεις για το φαινόμενο αυτό που θα μπορούσαν να βοηθήσουν την παραγωγή καφέ.
Και πολλά άλλα μαζί.
Καλησπέρα, είμαι ο Δημήτρης Μιλωνάς, μπαρίστα και bar manager του βραβευμένου εστιατορίου με αστέρι Μισελέν και αστέρι βιωσιμότητας, Soil.
So, on the first extract, there was a podcast talking about how emerging and interesting is TikTok for current music distribution and promotion. And on the second podcast, the team of the students decided to use our daily coffee routine as the perfect story to understand climate crisis. So, we have 2 lectures in Padion University. At first, we're doing some tech prep, we're telling students how to record an interview, basic principles of conducting an interview, how to use audio clips for multiple audio sources, how to use free libraries for music and sound effects, and how to apply some very, very basic principles of sound editing and designing. The most compelling, the most difficult, the most interesting part is the storytelling part. How to synthesize voiceover with interview quotes, how to use the findings of their online and archive research, how to use stats, how to use numbers, how to fact check everything, and how to produce in every stage of the process drafts, and more drafts. Then is the most satisfactory, I can say, stage of the process when we welcome students in IMED's HQ in the center of Athens. Teams gather, we're listening to their projects, extended audio clips, trailers. They present the visual identity of its podcast, and we exchange feedback, professional feedback, and the teams exchange feedback in between them. There's the whole discussion, which I think it enhances peer-to-peer learning, which is one of the biggest goals of this project. And this is more or less how we work, how we did it, how we're doing it each year, what we've learned. Zoomers are digital and tech natives. Year after year, we spend less time for the tech prep stage. I mean, they're applying basic editing principles in their TikToks. So there's no need for more room there. Where they need more guidance, because they were inexperienced, is how to synthesize, how to contextualize and paint a bigger picture. I tend to blame the shuttered environment of social media for this, not exactly misstep, but the fact that we have to convince them that context is bigger and more important than content, but this is a matter of a different conference, so I will not delve into that anymore. Zoomers listen to podcasts, but they almost exclusively listen to talk podcasts. So it wasn't the easiest part to convince them that they have to apply documentation, journalistic values, and not turn their projects into friendly chatter. And starting from year 1 to year 3, we've realized something you probably can imagine, that for this generation, content creators are the ultimate opinion leaders, and that for Gen Z, the social media are the media, period. But for some bigger picture reflection, I will jump back into Betty. Are they really Zoomers a black box, as they say?
All right, so what we think is that actually we learned that Gen Z is not this black box. Everyone is trying to understand through surveys how to include them in the market, how they have to engage them, how they can introduce them to new work ethics. So what I understand is that Gen Z is a really disruptive generation because they walk their talk, so they walk their values, and through this podcast, they use the podcast not as listeners only, but also as producers to become socially aware, socially connected, and also to create relevance with their stories, with their voices, to connect with the world. And also they prioritize, they call them sometimes Generation S, meaning generation sustainability. And all these topics from media, social media, to climate, to resilience are at the core of what they care about. And let's also consider if we change it, yes. So as you remember, we said we focused on how we give voice. So this is what they ask, give me voice, give me control. And what is important through the podcast, we understand that actually those audio voices, actually they aspire to become influencers, to have a direct influence on how they shape their lives, their social issues, and also to have an impact on them. So this is how they aspire and try to be trusted voices, provide trusted information to make the connections, and sometimes moving from the friendly chat into engaging conversations to build trust, to rebuild the environment. And this is how actually we become partners and sometimes followers of the Gen Z, because they inspire themselves, but also they inspire us to take the next step. Thank you, everyone.
To summarize and finish some numbers, 55 teams have participated in the project over the last 3 years, more than 300 students, and we have more than 10 hours of recording, which I repeat, you can find in whichever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. A picture of the team, and thank you, and you can scan for listening to the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Betty and Panagiotis. And now finally, the presentation with the best tagline, I think, the radio station for a town that doesn't exist. Thank you for coming along from Denmark, Clara Maj Kunstmann.
Thank you. So, these two actors and comedians, they got a bit bored during Corona. They have for a long time talking about making a spoof about what you can call a media scandal in Denmark when a very big and famous radio station got closed for political reasons. So they decided, let's try and make a spoof and a satire comedy. Let's see where it brings us. So for fun, they made around 15 episodes, and then because everything was closed under Corona, they just started sending. While making a story like this, you also need to, if you actually do open a radio station, it needs to be placed somewhere. So in all this story, they actually made a town, Skuldborg, in Denmark. Nobody really knows where it's located, but this city, of course, has everything that a city has, but it's a small city in Denmark. So when you do a satire comedy about opening up a radio station, at some point you actually need to do more than one program. So they started after 3 or 4 months, they started doing dummies for programs as part of the show. And what happened was, these two comedians are quite famous, and we started to get a lot of followers and a lot of listeners. And they started to demand that some of the dummies actually went into becoming real shows. So we started slowly making more shows. Some of them were good, some of them were really bad, and some of them still lives. But what I would like to tell you a bit about, because I'm also talking tomorrow when I'm speaking a bit more directly about the program, is that how we actually are making money on this commercial radio station. Because how do you actually make partnerships on something that doesn't exist? Well, it starts by creating a hype. And what we did was, this is with a big publisher in Denmark, we made a guidebook to this town. And it sold really well. But what was funny about it was that we actually had to start completely from the beginning, because when we started to make this tour, we needed to do a map. We needed to talk about what is actually in the city that we haven't talked about in the program. And what you see here on one of the pictures is that I think it was around 1,000 people that ordered the book in pre-sale. And our two main characters, the CEO of radio, the fictional radio, and the head of programs. The head of programs always eats croissants. No matter what, he eats all the time. So what we did was, we, of course, put their signatures within the book, but we also put croissant in all the books. So 1,000 books we had to send out, all received a book where they could see that the head of programs actually was signing the book because he was eating while he was doing it. So this is when fiction suddenly becomes reality, because you start creating stuff that could be real if it was a real city, and we decided why not go all the way. So of course, this town also has a brewery. And this actually means that we have now more than 10 different beers. These beers can be bought. This is our master. He's called Reinhard Weipauer, and he's, of course, from Germany. But in real life, he's called Frederik Silius and is a very famous Danish actor. So a lot of these famous people started to love the show and actually started to join the show as themselves or as fictional characters. The thing about the beer, we couldn't have done that ourselves. So we actually made a deal with one of the big breweries in the world, Royal Unibrew, and they went in on a sponsorship and helped us actually create this brewery. The funny thing was that we, of course, needed to sell it somewhere else and only in our web shop, so we made a deal with a very big supermarket called Menu, and they started to sell our beer as well. We created a character within the show called Mickey Menu. He was head of that supermarket in the town Skuldborg. And in one of the programs, there were a new beer coming out. He had a huge discussion, or fight, you can call it, with the CEO of Radio. And he threatened to take all of the beers from Skuldborg and put them close to the dog food. What actually happened in real life was that all the local shops started to put all the beers close to the dog food. And what they also experienced, the ones that didn't take the beer and put it by the dog food, they actually saw the customers carry the beer down and place it by the dog food. And we were a bit surprised, but this is also what really, really strong storytelling forces you to experience when you have a lot of followers. And for us, it's very important to actually get out in real life, because since it's a fictional story, we like to mix up with things that is going on. So sometimes you're not really sure if it's happening or not. We also just put out a music quiz where we made special rules, and it's definitely mostly fun if you know the show already. And this was also a good success for us. But this is one of the funny things, is that we actually also have a professional football team. So a football team from the second best division in Denmark said yes to going from being Aarhus Fremad, which is their name and the second biggest town in Denmark, said yes to be Skuldborg Fremad in the future. So what we did was we went to Aarhus during a game, and they hadn't announced anything to the fans or anything. So during the match, they signed a contract, and the CEO of Radio went out and told them they were so happy to actually get this football team and move them all to this town that doesn't exist, and everybody was confused. What happened was that their audience have more than tripled since they made this partnership with us. And of course, they're still Aarhus Fremad, but when we talk about them, we talk about them as Skuldborg Fremad. We've also made a TV show, a talk show in collaboration with Pluto, which it's been quite funny, because now we actually needed to put pictures on that only was audio. And it's really difficult, but it's also something that you really have to think about doing it, because you don't want to spoil whatever world you have created inside people's heads. But it has been a really big success, and this year we are making 2 more seasons of the talk show. Then we also, these are just examples, we have a lot of collaborators, but this is the biggest energy company in Denmark. And we convinced them to buy the local power plant so they could actually help the city become more climate friendly. And one of the ways that we launched this collaboration was that the guy you see here is the actor Kasper, but he's also the CEO of Radio in the story. And he always had a dream about being on television. So when he heard that Andel Energi were making a new commercial, he went to the casting. And this is how it went.
Okay, Andel Energi, Claus Bundgaard, take 1.
Jeg har en drøm. Godt, vi kører igen.
Tag det roligt, Claus.
Hold din kæft, Holger. Må jeg lige spørge, har det betydning, at det er jo mit firma, der leaser de her elbiler? Det er jo ikke privat, jeg har en elbil. Det vil jeg sgu aldrig selv gøre.
Claus Bundgaard, take 25. Klap. Tak.
Hallo, kan vi få klappet for fanden i helvede? Hun sagde fandme instruktørerne, det gik bare godt. Jeg var sådan lidt, jeg kunne have gjort det bedre. Ses næste gang på fjernsynet.
It didn't went that well. He wasn't in the commercial. But this is one of the examples of how we create something new to do a collaboration. And we have used this commercial a lot. It's a lot longer. But what has happened in radio started almost 5 years ago is that we have now reached 22 million downloads. And in a country with 5 million people, that is actually something that we're proud of. What also is happening is that, of course, when a show is running for 5 years, it decreases slowly in listeners. But what is interesting is that our social media and other activities grows almost by 100% each year. So people are still following the universe and they still want to be a part of the story. So a few takeaways. Apparently you can sell stuff that doesn't exist. It's a bit difficult sometimes because you have to tell this story in a very short and precise way. But what we always do is that we communicate that everything we do is a huge success. A bit like what's happening in the States maybe. And then people try to just believe you because we're telling it all the time. And what I've experienced is that if you don't ask, there's no getting a yes. So even though it's difficult to try and tell people that doesn't know anything about radio, what we're doing, a city that doesn't exist, a radio station that actually don't exist, but now it exists, some of them actually jumps on and they tend to be very good collaborators and also pay us quite a lot of money to do it.
Thank you very much. I mean, in honesty, I've been on Radiodays program group for 9 years now, and I've never heard a story like this before, and I say that with the most respect. I mean, how much creative, how much brain, and how much courage do you need to create something literally out of nothing and make it such a huge success? That's just amazing. Are there any? We have time for a question or two. If there are any questions in the audience, please pop up your hand. And I will answer the question, when is the party starting, in a minute. Oh, by the way, if you want to hear more about Clara and her case, go to my friend Remy's session tomorrow at 10 in track 3, which is called Laughing All the Way to Number 1. This is where Clara will be as well, tomorrow at 10 in track 3. Any questions in the audience? I can't see, but that's probably me. There are no questions, in which case I thank you all very much. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. Have a lot of fun at the radio night and see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much.